In 1997, the quarter still bore the familiar heraldic eagle reverse introduced in 1932 to honor George Washington's 200th birthday. It was the final year before the U.S. Mint embarked on its ambitious state quarters program, a series that would transform collecting forever. Yet before that celebrated changeover, the Mint quietly struck over 1.2 billion quarters, most in Philadelphia and Denver, with San Francisco producing proof issues. They were ordinary coins meant to keep commerce moving, unremarkable in design but stable in history. Hidden in this final stretch of traditional quarters, however, something extraordinary slipped into circulation. An error that would later spark excitement, disbelief, and even rivalry among collectors. And the first whispers of it came from a modest coin show in Ohio in late 1998. A hobbyist named David Martin, who had spent decades hunting minor double dies and die cracks, was flipping through a dealer's junk box when he noticed a quarter that felt odd. The obverse struck him first. Washington's eye looked strangely distorted, almost doubled. He lifted the coin closer, tilting it under fluorescent light. The word Liberty carried faint, shadowy impressions alongside the bold lettering. The date, 1997, looked like it had been echoed, the 7 in particular splitting into 2 distinct edges. His heart quickened. This was no ordinary strike. And David purchased the coin for $1 and slipped it into his pocket. That evening, back at home with his magnifier, he confirmed his suspicion. This was a double die obverse, bold enough to qualify as significant. But when he turned the coin over, something even more startling caught his eye. The eagle's wings appeared uneven. One feathered edge doubled in such a way that it looked like the bird itself was trembling. Even more curious, the E in E pluribus unum was misshapen, stretched vertically like it had been pulled during striking. A chill ran down his spine. He realized this might be more than a simple double die. It could represent a flawed die clash, perhaps even a transition problem as the Mint prepared for the radical changes of 1999. And still unsure, David reached out to a small circle of collectors he trusted. One dismissed it as machine doubling, another grew curious, and a third insisted on seeing the coin in person. Weeks later, at a local club meeting, David unveiled his find. The room buzzed. Some leaned in with disbelief, others whispered about potential value. For David, it wasn't about the money just yet. It was about the hunt, the possibility that he had stumbled across something no one else had recognized. And it didn't take long before the discovery began to ripple outward. Word of the 1997 double die quarters spread through hobby newsletters, then onto early internet forums. A handful of other collectors reported similar finds, mostly from the Philadelphia Mint, though Denver specimens surfaced too. Each carried slightly different doubling, suggesting multiple dies had been affected. The excitement was palpable. A last-year Washington quarter, just before the State Series, carrying significant Mint errors. The timing made the coin symbolic, almost prophetic, an imperfect farewell to an era. At first, the market responded cautiously. Early sales fetched $20, then $50 for raw examples. By 2001, as the state quarters frenzy exploded, collectors began looking back with renewed interest. Certified examples graded in Mint state started to climb. A particularly sharp double die obverse in MS-65 sold at auction for $375, shocking those who had dismissed the variety as minor. Over the next decade, the price trajectory wove unpredictably, sometimes dipping as interest shifted to newer issues, then spiking again whenever an article or video brought renewed attention. The suspense lay not only in the coins themselves but in their mercurial value, which seemed to rise and fall with the tides of collector passion. But the story did not end with doubling. In 2007, a collector in Texas stumbled across something stranger still. A 1997 quarter struck on a clad dime planchet. The coin was visibly undersized, with Washington's portrait compressed into the smaller flan. The reverse eagle looked truncated, its wingtips sliced off by the rim. Certified quickly, this Mint error sold for over $4,000. Soon after, other off-metal strikes emerged, 1997 quarters on nickel planchets, one even on a golden-colored experimental flan believed to have been tested for the Sacagawea dollar program. Each new discovery deepened the intrigue around 1997, transforming what had once been seen as a dull prelude year into a numismatic puzzle. /N/N David watched all of this unfold with mixed emotions. His original find, the one that had set off his journey, remained in his possession. He received offers, hundreds, then thousands, but he refused to sell. For him, its value lay beyond price. He recalled vividly the first time he had held it under his magnifier, the thrill of realizing he was staring into a mistake frozen forever in metal. No matter what the market said, that memory was priceless. /N/and the fascination with 1997 quarters reached a new climax in 2015 when researchers uncovered a twist no one had predicted. A small batch of 1997 Denver quarters bore faint remnants of the new state quarter hubs. On the reverse, beneath the eagle's wings, subtle outlines of what appeared to be the Delaware design, a rider on horseback, were visible under magnification. The theory was electrifying. As the mint prepared the dies for the state quarters launch, an accidental overhubbing allowed design elements from the upcoming series to ghost onto the last year eagles. These hybrid whispers, a literal overlap of eras, were unlike anything collectors had seen. /N/and the revelation shook the market. Collectors who had once overlooked their 1997 pocket change now searched frantically, hoping to uncover the elusive Delaware ghost quarters. Specimens verified by third-party grading companies skyrocketed in value. One sold privately for a rumored $12,000, though the exact price was never confirmed. Others brought five-figure sums at auction, establishing the error as one of the most significant transitional oddities of modern U.S. coinage. /N/and for David, now older and more reflective, the twist only deepened his appreciation. His coin had been the first clue in a much larger story, one that bridged tradition and transformation. He often wondered how many more surprises might lurk in the billions of 1997 quarters still circulating. Were there undiscovered die clashes, hidden transitional whispers, or other planchet anomalies waiting to surface? The uncertainty kept the year alive in the imagination of collectors everywhere. /N/and what makes the 1997 quarter error story so captivating is not just its variety, the double dies, the off-metal strikes, the transitional ghosts, but its timing. It marked the end of one chapter and the hidden beginning of another. The coin, struck in anonymity, carried within its flaws a message that perfection is never absolute, that even in mass production, chance can leave a trace of mystery. /N/and today, a pristine double die obverse from 1997 may bring hundreds, while transitional ghosts and off-metal strikes command thousands. But the true value lies in the chase, the thrill of discovery, the knowledge that something so small, so ordinary in the hand, can hold within it a story of error, transformation, and suspense. Somewhere in circulation, perhaps even now, another overlooked 1997 quarter may be waiting in change trays and coffee shop tills, carrying its secret doubling or ghost design, just as David's coin once did, quiet, unnoticed, until the right pair of eyes looks close enough to see the extraordinary hidden in the ordinary. The year 1965 marked a turning point in American coinage. For more than 170 years, U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars had contained silver, 90% of their weight, a precious metal that tied the nation's money to tangible value. But rising silver prices during the early 1960s created a crisis. The metal content of coins was beginning to exceed their face value, sparking fears of hoarding and shortages. Congress acted quickly. The Coinage Act of 1965 stripped silver from dimes and quarters, replacing it with clad copper-nickel layers bonded over a copper core. The quarter, once shining with the luster of silver, was now a sandwich of base metals. Mint officials reassured the public that the new coins would be durable, attractive, and practical. Few could have imagined that this monumental change would give rise to one of the most fascinating error coins in modern history as the transition began. The mint faced enormous pressure to keep production flowing. Billions of coins were required to feed the economy, and striking errors were almost inevitable during the shift. Old silver planchets still lingered in the machinery, and some accidentally mixed with the new clad blanks. This set the stage for the birth of the most legendary error of the era. The 1965 quarter struck on a silver planchet, a ghost of the past clinging to a new age of coinage. One such coin surfaced years later, in the hands of a man named Arthur Caldwell, a collector from Pennsylvania. Arthur had been searching through change since the 1950s, first looking for wheat cents and mercury dimes, later focusing on silver coins as the transition unfolded. He remembered the national uproar when people realized their silver coins were vanishing, replaced by clad substitutes that looked similar but carried none of the same weight or tone. To Arthur's practiced eye, the difference between silver and clad was unmistakable. It was in 1972, while rolling quarters for the bank, that Arthur spotted something odd. Among a stack of clad quarters, one coin flashed a different sheen. It lacked the telltale copper edge of the new issues. Its ring, when tapped against a tabletop, sang with a higher pitch. He pulled it aside, heart racing. The date read 1965. That was impossible, or so it should have been. Arthur spent the next days poring over reference books and consulting fellow collectors. Could this quarter really have been struck on leftover silver stock? Weighing it provided the first answer: 6.25 grams, precisely the weight of a silver quarter, not the 5.67 grams of the clad composition. He had in his hand a relic of a transition the mint had sworn would never allow such mistakes. The 1965 silver quarter was real, and against all odds, Arthur had found 1.at first. The discovery was more curiosity than treasure. In the 1970s, modern mint errors were still a niche pursuit. Dealers offered Arthur $50, sometimes $100, for his coin, which he politely declined. He wanted to understand its significance before letting it go. Over time, more examples surfaced. Word spread that a few dozen 1965 silver quarters had escaped into circulation, their exact number unknown. By the 1980s, as error collecting grew in popularity, demand soared. Prices climbed into the hundreds, then the thousands, as the coins became recognized as genuine transitional errors, accidents of history that bridged two eras of American coinage. The market grew volatile as excitement built. Some collectors whispered that the coins had been deliberately smuggled from the mint, making them illegitimate. Others countered that the sheer number of examples confirmed it was an authentic minting mishap. Auction houses began listing certified pieces, their hammer prices climbing higher each year. A coin Arthur once considered selling for $100 was now worth thousands, and he watched with awe as his small discovery transformed into a numismatic legend. The physical characteristics of the coin only added to its allure. The silver planchet gave it a brighter, almost icy luster compared to clad pieces. Its edge gleamed uniformly silver with no exposed copper core. When stacked with clad quarters, it stood out like a misplaced relic. Under magnification, the strike revealed no tampering, no evidence of outside manipulation. It was unquestionably genuine, the product of the mint's own presses. And because so few survived, each example became a story in itself, a survivor of a chaotic transition. Then, as the years passed, a new twist emerged. Collectors discovered that not all 1965 errors were struck on quarter planchets. Some had been accidentally struck on leftover silver dime or foreign coin blanks, producing undersized but unmistakably silver pieces with full quarter designs squeezed onto them. These oddities carried their own aura of mystery, raising questions about how many different mistakes had occurred during that turbulent year. The 1965 quarter was no longer just one error. It had become a family of anomalies, each hinting at the mint's struggle to control its machinery during the shift away from silver. Arthur eventually decided to send his coin to a grading service in the 1990s, where it was authenticated and encapsulated. The label confirmed what he had known for decades. 1965 quarter struck on silver planchet. Its value by then had surpassed $7,000 in auction results, and rising demand suggested it might climb even higher. For Arthur, the monetary figure mattered less than the journey. His coin had carried him through decades of discovery, doubt, and vindication. It was no longer just change pulled from circulation. It was a historical artifact, a testament to the fragility of perfection within the mint's mighty presses. In recent years, the 1965 silver quarter has become one of the most sought-after transitional errors in American numismatics. Pristine examples graded MS-65 and above have realized staggering prices at auction, sometimes exceeding $10,000. Even circulated pieces command thousands, their appeal undiminished by wear. Collectors whisper of the possibility that more may remain undiscovered, lurking in old coffee cans or forgotten rolls, waiting for another sharp eye to recognize their telltale gleam. And yet, the story still holds mysteries. Were these errors the result of oversight, with leftover silver blanks feeding into presses long after the transition was complete? Or were they anomalies of intent, struck by mint workers aware of their rarity? The truth remains obscured, as the mint has never offered a definitive explanation. Each 1965 silver quarter carries with it that ambiguity, a question mark etched in metal. For collectors, that uncertainty is part of the allure. The 1965 quarter stands at the crossroads of two eras, one of silver, tied to centuries of tradition, and one of modern-clad coinage, practical but prosaic. To hold one of the silver eras is to glimpse the moment of change itself, when the old world and the new collided in the dyes of the mint. Its value, both monetary and historical, continues to evolve with each passing decade. Arthur passed his coin down to his grandson, who now treasures it not just as a piece of silver, but as a family story entwined with national history. Each time he shows it to others, he begins not with its price, but with its sound, the bright, ringing tone of silver against a tabletop, a sound that vanished from American change in 1965, yet lives on in a handful of extraordinary errors. Somewhere in the endless circulation of quarters, more may still be hiding, their edges flashing silver among the copper cores, waiting to be noticed, waiting to tell their story anew. In 1986, the Washington quarter was already a familiar figure in the pockets of millions of Americans. For more than 5 decades, George Washington's profile had graced the obverse, while the proud eagle clutched its bundle of arrows on the reverse. This was before the 50-state quarters program, before commemoratives transformed the denomination into a collector's playground. In 1986, the quarter was still a workhorse of commerce, struck in massive numbers at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. Over 1.5 billion quarters were produced that year, a staggering tide of identical silver-colored discs that seemed to leave little room for anything unusual. Yet even among the billions, mistakes sometimes slipped through, carrying secrets that would lie hidden until the right pair of eyes stumbled upon them. For a collector named Thomas from Ohio, those secrets revealed themselves one quiet evening in 1991. He was not a seasoned dealer, nor someone who specialized in errors. He was a schoolteacher with a modest passion for coins inherited from his grandfather. Most of his collection consisted of circulated wheat cents and a few silver dollars, but he enjoyed sifting through pocket change, especially quarters, for anything interesting. On this night, he was separating coins to roll them for the bank when he spotted one quarter that seemed slightly thicker at the edge. Its rim was uneven, bulging in certain places as though it had been pressed off balance. Curious, he picked it up and turned it over. At first glance, it looked like any other 1986 quarter. Washington's portrait on the obverse, the eagle on the reverse, nothing unusual. But when Thomas tilted the coin under the desk lamp, his breath caught. The eagle's wings were doubled, shadow-like impressions of feathers fanning out just above the real ones. The arrows in its talons also appeared split, almost as if the bird clutched 2 sets. He flipped it again. On the obverse, the word Liberty carried faint but undeniable traces of doubling. The date 1986 bore what looked like a secondary outline, not flat and shelf-like as machine doubling often appears, but rounded, raised, alive with the hallmarks of a true double die. He knew enough to recognize that this was not ordinary wear and tear. His heart raced. Could it really be a double die Washington quarter, hiding unnoticed for years in his spare change? The thought filled him with equal parts excitement and skepticism. He tucked the coin away carefully, resolved to learn more. Over the next several weeks, Thomas scoured every reference book he could find. Most publications of the time cataloged earlier double dies, the famous 1955 Lincoln cent, the 1937 D three-legged buffalo nickel, but very little was written about modern quarters. At local coin shops, dealers dismissed him. Some waved it off as a minor strike issue, not worth attention. Yet Thomas remained convinced. Something about the way the doubling looked, bold, rounded, consistent, told him this was no trivial anomaly. His instincts proved correct. As years passed, other collectors began reporting similar finds from 1986 quarters, most originating from the Philadelphia Mint. Coin forums and newsletters of the 1990s buzzed with speculation. Was this an overlooked double die variety? A rare misalignment in the hubbing process? The evidence grew stronger with each new specimen that surfaced. And with recognition came value. At first, prices were modest. In circulated grades, examples sold for just a few dollars, 10 at most, when they appeared at small shows. But as certification services like PCGS and NGC expanded their error coin designations, demand increased. By the early 2000s, high-grade, uncirculated specimens drew serious premiums. Collectors were paying $75, then $150, for coins with bold doubling on the date and eagle. The market was no longer treating these as curiosities but as legitimate varieties in the Washington Quarter series. For Thomas, watching the value of his discovery climb was thrilling. He had kept the coin safe all those years, never tempted to sell. It wasn't about profit to him. It was about the story, the strange thrill of finding a rarity in change, of being one of the first to notice what others had overlooked. He felt a connection to the mystery of the mint, to the small imperfections in massive production that could transform a common coin into something extraordinary. Yet the 1986 quarter held more secrets than even he suspected. In 2009, an auction house in Texas cataloged a new type of 1986 error, an off-metal strike. Instead of being struck on a copper-nickel-clad quarter planchet, several examples had been produced on copper-cent planchets. These coins were thinner, reddish in tone, and weighed only 3.11 grams instead of the usual 5.67. Somehow, a batch of cent blanks had been fed into the quarter presses, resulting in undersized coins with incomplete details that nevertheless bore the date 1986 and the quarter's design. One specimen sold for $3,500, astonishing the audience. Suddenly, the 1986 quarter was no longer just a double-die curiosity. It was a year filled with oddities. But the most shocking twist came later. A small group of collectors in Florida reported an extraordinary mule error. A 1986 quarter struck with a reverse that did not belong to its own die pair. Instead of the traditional eagle, the coin carried the reverse of a dime. The mismatched strike left partial designs overlapping, with Washington's head paired against an undersized wreath. Experts initially doubted the authenticity, but after rigorous testing, at least one piece was confirmed as genuine. The implications were staggering. Such mule errors are among the rarest in numismatics, often worth tens of thousands, and now 1986 quarters were tied to one of the most bizarre minting mistakes imaginable. Prices surged. The once dismissed double dies of 1986 climbed further in value, buoyed by the spotlight of attention. Collectors began combing rolls and bags of quarters from that year, desperate to uncover overlooked treasures. Circulated examples of the double die obverse now fetched $50, while gem uncirculated pieces soared into the hundreds. The copper off-metal strikes, though nearly impossible to find, commanded thousands each. And the mule, if it ever reappeared at auction, was predicted to reach six figures. Through it all, Thomas kept his first discovery locked in a small box. He occasionally took it out, held it in his palm, and remembered that quiet night in 1991 when he had first noticed something strange about a worn coin in his change. He thought about how many people had likely handled similar quarters without noticing, how many had spent them on groceries or gas, unaware of the fortune hiding in plain sight. The story of the 1986 quarter was, to him, a reminder that the most extraordinary things sometimes emerge from the most ordinary places. The legacy of that year's coinage is still debated among collectors. Was it simply the result of careless die preparation at the Philadelphia Mint? Or was there something more, an unusual breakdown in quality control that led to an unusual cluster of errors in the same denomination, the same year? The truth remains uncertain, locked in the guarded records of the Mint. What is certain, however, is that 1986 produced more than its share of anomalies, and each new discovery adds to the mystique. Even now, decades later, stories surface of pocket change finds. A doubled liberty, an off-center strike, a reddish off-metal piece mistaken for a cent. Each discovery fuels the hope that more treasures remain hidden among the billions. The quarter, that unassuming workhorse of commerce, carries with it the possibility of shock and wonder. And in 1986, those possibilities multiplied, leaving behind a trail of mysteries, a surge of excitement, and a reminder that no coin should ever be overlooked.